Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode number 29 of Cardboard Time. This is Arwen, and with me this episode is Jamie. Welcome back, Jamie.
Hey, thanks, Arwen. Good to be back.
Well, we have a bit of a long episode today. There is lots of ground to cover. We have our normal stuff that we're doing. We're doing a little bit of a holiday gift guide. It is that time of year again. And at the end of the episode is a exclusive interview with Michael Gnade of Rock Manor Games. So lots of ground to cover. So let's get right into the beer of the day. And mine is the Furious by Surly Brewing Company out of Minneapolis. This was a IPA that definitely had its share of hops, but it also balanced out with some malt as well. I'm a really big fan of well-balanced IPAs that don't just try to taste as much like a pine cone as possible. I drank this prior to the AEW pay-per-view that I went to out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I gave this one a 4. Very, very enjoyable. Jamie, what about you?
Well, first off, I want to comment on that. I have to agree that, I used to work in a craft beer bar, and it always seemed to me that people were always trying to make the hoppiest IPA. And I felt like there's not a whole lot of elegance in that concept because you could cover up a lot with really strong flavors. So it doesn't leave a whole lot of space for nuance, I guess, that I look for in a drink. So that said, my beer of the week, or beer of the day rather, is something I had during my Thanksgiving dinner, which was waffle sauce from Rusty Rail Brewing Company. It is a brown ale, and it's brewed with, as you could probably guess, maple syrup and maple pecan, rather. And I always find it really hard to find brown ales, and which is such a shame because that's probably my favorite style of beer that exists.
They are good.
They're so hard to find. Good. So when I can find one, I definitely take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I really enjoy the name too. I mean, waffle sauce just kind of, like you said, it's very, I don't know exactly what the word for it, but it invokes kind of that feeling of, okay, yeah, this is definitely going to have some sort of maple component to it. So maple pecan sounds amazing.
It knows exactly what it's about.
Yeah, no doubt. No, so it was good, I take it then.
Very good, yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's time to check the shelf of shame. I am at 151. That is up 1 from the last episode. 4 new additions into the collection. The first is Pret-a-Porter, and I had to actually pull up a YouTube explanation on how to enunciate that. My French is non-existent at best. And the YouTube video that I pulled up basically had like a long-winded explanation of what it was before pronouncing it. And so I got a little history of what that means, and apparently it means ready to wear as opposed to tailor-made. So it's a game about fashion. It's something that's been on my radar for a long time, and I picked this one up at Games by James, and that was in Minneapolis at the Mall of America. And boy, I wanted to tell you, I enjoyed shopping and getting to ride rides inside the mall. It was an amazing trip, and that was a little souvenir for me. Brew was also another pickup at Games by James, and a couple of people had mentioned that one, you included.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of very smart people really like that game.
Yep, and the other one you're going to hear from at the end of the episode, so I actually recorded that segment prior to heading out to the mall, and that seemed like a very logical pickup, little souvenir action from Minneapolis. Kanban EV I picked up at Gots A Lot of Games from their Black Friday sale, so Lacerda, the Gallerist was an amazing, amazing experience. And I decided that I needed more of it in my life. And for $90, you can't go wrong with the amount of game that is in that box. So I just punched everything today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what is exactly in the box as far as gameplay goes. And then last but not least is Hadara. I got that from Full Grip Games in Akron. It was a gift certificate from my friend Ashley for my birthday, and I have been searching for this one for quite a while. This was a game that had been talked about on the Boards Alive podcast, and I'd actually seen in action at Origins in 2019, but couldn't get my hands on it for quite a while. It was sold out, and I guess they decided to do another print run. So fortunately, I was able to pick that up. As far as what I played, I got 3 games to the table. The first one being the solo mode that someone had developed on BGG for Brew. Didn't do it justice. I could see where the game is going. It seems like it's a very mean game, despite its cute artwork and everything. It seems like it's going to be really, really awesome.
I found something really interesting about Brew, and maybe this is best saved for after we kind of discuss what the whole dealio with it is, but I found that it plays very differently depending on the circumstances under which you play it, and specifically how many people you play it with.
That will be interesting to see. I really do need to play that one in person, and maybe this Thursday will be a very good time to get that one out to the table. We'll see. The next game that I played was How to Rob a Bank. I did play that with Allie while I was out in Minneapolis. A very interesting programming type game. Heads up, I think it can play between 2 and 4, with one person being the bank and the rest being robbers. It was very, very interesting to see how that game played out. I like programming games a lot, and I was able to win as the robbers, and it was solid. I enjoyed it. I don't know if we're ever going to get a full review of it on the channel, but just long and short of it, it's staying in the collection for a while. Very easy to teach and portable. So
I just wanted to make sure you played a game and you didn't actually rob a bank while you were.
No, I didn't actually rob a bank. I just good. I should have probably considered it, considering how much I purchased while I was at the mall. But
well, now you know how.
Yeah, exactly. I put my plans out, and now I've got the skills to do it. And then the last game that I played was Hadara, and this was a official solo mode that was put out from Z-Man Games, the developer. And it was a very interesting concept for a dummy player, but I really know that I'm going to like the multiplayer better already. Good, solid drafting, really cool engine building. It's going to be a great game, and I can't wait to see what this does multiplayer at the table. And then Hero Quest actually came in as well, but since I've already played it, that doesn't count towards the Shelf of Shame. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the app is going to bring to the experience. And then the Space Base Alpha version on Board Game Arena, I have been playing a ton of with Board Gaming Momosaurus. It's a fantastic implementation. It is still an alpha, but I've really been enjoying it, and it is so much fun to play. So easy. It just lends itself to playing on even mobile devices. Really, really well done. I'm hoping that it gets out of alpha very soon so that other people can play it. So, as far as what we've been playing, the very first game that I want to talk about is Gladius from 2021. This was a review copy furnished by Deepwater Games. Plays from 2 to 5 players in 20 to 30 minutes. Designed by Alexander Uboldi and Victoria Kana, and the artist is Cheryl Young. Published by Cat Quartet and Deepwater Games. In Gladius, players are cunning Roman spectators trying to make the most money by betting on gladiators competing in the gladiatorial games. Through the skillful use of underhanded tactics, players can help and hinder teams to alter the outcome of each battle. Can you outwit your opponents to turn a profit, or will you be left empty-handed? Jamie, what were your thoughts on Gladius?
Well, I really liked it, mostly because if I remember correctly, I won pretty handily. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, I was getting a drink of water. And no,
okay.
I'm pretty sure that you won very, very handily in this.
I figured out the conceit of this game pretty quickly. I think it was also a benefit of the fact that the character that I chose worked really well for the situations that we encountered. It was really unique in terms of how it plays, and how the interactions between the characters kind of changes things up a little bit. There were a lot of fun little Easter eggs in the art that we discovered. One of which was Dave. A very, how shall we say, ineffective gladiator that was clearly
super ineffective.
Yes, and it was clearly like mocking somebody on the development team, and it was pretty fun. We checked the credits, and there was indeed someone named Dave on the development team, so that was fun. And I loved the artwork personally. I thought it was really neat and just very. It was serious, but it didn't take itself seriously, if that makes sense. The art style was cartoony, but it wasn't hard to get into the game. It wasn't a barrier of entry to the game. Like it didn't make it feel childish, I guess. Not that cartoons are inherently childish, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah, and I think one other point to that, Jamie, was the diversity that was kind of displayed. There was a lot of really good diversity, and it wasn't forced. It just felt natural.
Absolutely.
So that was another part of the artwork that I really liked.
Yeah, the character design felt very organic in terms of having other representatives, from different backgrounds, presumably, of course, in their character roster, and it just ended up being a lot of fun because it lent to the diversity in both, character roles and also character representation.
Any other thoughts on the game?
Generally speaking, it was a little bit hard to get the concepts down, but once we kind of clarified the whole betting system, it became a lot more fun to try to kind of feint and outwit your opponent by perhaps placing, enhancements on a side that you're just going to completely like hamstring later in the game. The depth of play became a lot more obvious after a few rounds, and I think by then I had a couple early rounds that were lucky enough to come out on top. So other than that, no, I enjoyed it enough. I don't know how often it's going to make it to the table for me because it is a little bit difficult to teach, I think, without having played games before, which is a really unique position I find myself in nowadays. Like trying to teach people who don't have the benefit of the lexicon of having played games before, or even if they have, I found it still kind of difficult for everyone to grasp, the nuance of this particular game.
Yeah, and a couple of things that I wanted to kind of piggyback off of were, the teach of the game. It felt easy to teach to maybe a more experienced gamer. Somebody who's played a lot of games is going to pick this up really quickly.
Mhm.
But there may be too many concepts for newcomers in this. And I was hoping with the box size and the approachable arts that it was going to be a little bit easier to teach than it was. But that said, if you have somebody in your group that is very experienced, they will pick this up right away. The game felt decently sized in relationship to the box size. I mean, it's a very small box, but there is definitely a decent size game there that's going to feel the upper weight of maybe a filler. But I think that it still is very solid for its size. So still portable, but yeah, definitely a bigger game.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, because usually games this size travel with me. They're the games that I break out basically at any opportunity, like obviously like Button Shy, but I also for me is more oh, it's escaping me now. Love Letter is one of them. Coup is another. It's something you can explain in a few sentences and get out on the table for anybody, even if they're not game players. I think this one's just a bit out of reach.
I would agree with that 100%. And I did enjoy the mind games in this. I thought that was an interesting component, but I also kind of left the game feeling like I needed just maybe a couple more pieces of information about what my opponents were doing, or at least the ability to find out. So maybe to sacrifice some of my own actions to find out what somebody else was doing. And I think there was a special power that allowed you to do that, but not everybody had it. So,
Right.
it just felt like it was maybe missing something like that. But and then finally, I really enjoyed the aspect of really betting on the games and manipulating them instead of actually executing them. That was kind of fun. A lot of the gladiatorial combat games, you are the one that's personally involved, and this is just kind of behind the scenes, just manipulating and trying to spread your influence out so that things go your way. I really like that theme, and I felt that it translated well to the cards that you were playing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that.
So overall, for me, my final judgment on this, and I'm going to ask for your final judgment because you have a copy as well, but I'm probably going to keep this around to see what others think of it. I don't necessarily see the need to part with it right away, but I also need some time to really understand if it's going to be a permanent part of the collection. And as far as a betting game goes, if I have the room for it, I definitely would rather play a game like Curse Court. But this was still very solid. So it's just a matter of whether or not it's going to have that permanent place in my collection and have a spot. So, Jamie, how about you?
I could see this one taking up a niche in my like more dedicated group of game players, just because the variety of things that can occur, and just sort of like analyzing the depth of play involved. I feel like if you were to play it with a consistent group repeatedly, you could really start to get some interesting stuff out of it. But outside of that, I don't know that it's something that I'll bring to family events or anything like that. It's just, I think there's so many moving parts. I just think unless you're a really dedicated player, it's hard to sell people on.
I would definitely agree. So that was Gladius. And the other game that we're going to talk about today is a game called Seven Summits. And this was also published in 2021. 2 to 5 players, 30 to 40 minutes, designed by Adrian Adamescu and Daryl Andrews. The artists are Megan Cheever, Quanchi Moria, and Sean Seal, and this was also published by Deepwater Games. In Seven Summits, you are a team of world-class mountain climbers. Use the dice to your advantage to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, upgrade your equipment, and advance your skills. Will you be the first to climb them all? In this dice drafting game, you'll choose a die to climb its associated mountain. You can stop early to play it safe or press on for the summit. But watch out, each time you press on, you run the risk of an avalanche, pushing your climber all the way back down to the base of the mountain. Jamie, what are your thoughts on 7 Summits?
I really enjoyed 7 Summits. I love games in which I have to press my luck, mostly because I have ridiculous amounts of luck. So anything in which I can exploit that is definitely the game for me. I also really like the simplicity behind it, and I would like to see it with more players. I think it was totally fun with just the 2 of us. And it operated really well at that level, but I would be eager to see how much that changed with more than 2, because the competition was already kind of fierce between the 2 of us to climb the particular mountains, and as I recall, there were kind of secret objectives that we were both trying to accomplish. So I could see the field becoming pretty crowded with more than 2 people. That said, I would be eager to find to see how it would play at that level.
I do feel that this would be a game that would be more welcome to a larger player group. As it gets more crowded, you're going to have more tension, and pushing your luck is going to be that much more perilous. Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I definitely would agree with that. What else?
I mean, like I said, I think mostly for me, it's just being excited about finding a game where exploiting my ridiculous luck is part of the whole core concept. Any time in which I have to lean on that is not a fun time for people that play with me. I'm kind of notorious for having quite a bit of unfair advantage in terms of luck-based games. I think it's mostly just because I don't know. I don't take games too seriously when I don't have to, and so I do always take the option to do the stupid thing because I think it's fun. And a lot of people like to play it safe, and I don't, and it tends to pay off for me. So this is a game in which that is the optimal way to play, in my opinion. So yes. I liked it.
Yes, absolutely. And there are places that stopping strategically is definitely an advantage, which I kind of liked. It wasn't just like pure can't stop pressure luck, which I'm going to reference a ton in my thoughts. So we played this at Origins this year. I actually picked this one up at Dragon Con, and a lot of descriptions that I read say that it's can't stop with extra steps. And I would just call it the next step from can't stop, instead, because it just feels like those extra steps actually have some value. And that was kind of my takeaway. This really goes against my normal nothing below a 7 on BGG. I think this ranked in at a 6.5 or a 6.4, which I think was a little bit low for the experience that we had with it. A couple of small gripes I had with it. The board spaces were definitely smaller than what I'd normally like to see. So people with larger hands might have some trouble, especially with the higher player counts, placing your markers. So that's definitely something that could be a problem. But I think the pressure luck decision space in this definitely differs from can't stop in the fact that you can lose everything if you go too far. I think there's a 1 in 6 chance that you're going to cause an avalanche, and basically, you could have stopped 3 or 4 times on previous rolls. You hit that avalanche and you're going all the way back down to the bottom of the mountain, which I think is really much more interesting than having that stop and never being able to head back. And then the leveling up of your character was incredibly important too. So being able to unlock some of those other abilities was really incredibly crucial to your gameplay, and I found that really, really cool as well. And then finally, I think this is an easy kind of next step game for newer players to grasp. So if you get somebody, and this is kind of rolling into my final judgment, if you get somebody that already has played Can't Stop and you want to introduce a concept like dice drafting to them, they already grasp Can't Stop. They're like, yep, I can do more. This is definitely an optional next stepping stone. I wouldn't call it a must buy, especially if you own Can't Stop, but I absolutely don't regret picking it up and having it in my collection. Well, I want the same action, but something a bit meatier. So that was 7 summits. And Jamie, it is coming up to the holidays. So a couple of people had gotten a hold of me and said, you better do a little holiday gift guide before the holidays are already done and over with. And considering that we're already done with Thanksgiving at the time of release of this podcast, I guess it's time. These are kind of games that we discovered this year. I've got 3 of them. I don't know what Jamie has in store for us, but these are basically things that I've discovered this year that are games that I would say, oh yeah, this is something that you could give to your friends, family, and loved ones and have it be a good gift, things that are easy to pick up, and will fit very well under the Christmas tree. So if you're looking for some additional recommendations as well, go back to episode number 4. I know that was a long time ago, but there were some great recommendations as well on that episode. So Jamie, anything that you wanted to mention as a really good gift this Christmas and holiday season?
Oh, definitely. When I think of good gifts, especially in terms of games, I like to think of stocking stuffers. And I do see on your notes that you have Button Shy on here, so I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit and suggest Tussie Mussy from Button Shy. Rachel and I played that on our anniversary trip at a bar, and it was so easy to just like break out and just a really simple, fun little game. So it's like it hits all the notes. It's a good price point. It's a good size. It is just a fantastic way to burn a couple minutes while you're waiting for your food to show up, or, and it's another one of those, like, there's surprising depth to it despite it being such a simple concept.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that Tussie Mussy is kind of one of those must-haves. I'm glad that you mentioned it. So I'm going to stray away from Button Shy for a little bit. My first game is Point Salad by AEG, and this one I picked up just prior to DragonCon, and I have been loving it ever since. It's very quick to teach. You can play with just about anybody, but it's still a very strategically sound game. And it really provides good, different experiences at both low and high player counts. So your lower player counts are going to be more heads up, strategic, trying to block, trying to maneuver around your opponent. There's a lot of hate drafting that goes on. And then 6 players is more of like your free for all. I'm just going to focus on me and hope that none of my opponents can best me. So I thought both of those experiences were pretty cool. So Jamie, what else?
What else? I've been having a lot of fun with Vagrant Song. I don't know how easy that is to get your hands on at this point, but the part of oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the Christmas song now, but they say scary ghost stories.
Mhm.
This is a perfect game for scary ghost stories. It's kind of RPG light too, so it's a good one to kind of tuck into in the middle of a snowstorm when nobody can go anywhere anyway. Just a great little way to spend a couple hours in a cozy afternoon at home with your family, maybe after opening Christmas presents or something. I really can't say enough about it. It's just in terms of the presentation and the gameplay. It's a tight little game.
Yeah, get some eggnog or some hot apple cider and just kind of curl up with a good game. I could
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that. My second one is Monstrosity by Deepwater Games, and I have talked a lot about Deepwater this episode already, but I picked this up at DragonCon, and I've brought it out at just about every single major gathering since when I have a larger crowd. My favorite drawing game this year was originally established as Pictomania. That kind of took the top spot of just my favorite drawing games. I loved it. I had a great time with it. Still an amazing game, but it was quickly dethroned by Monstrosity. I absolutely adore this game. And it's good fun for anyone, whether you can draw or not. It really creates a lot of moments that you'll be thinking and talking about for years with your friends and family. And I just really, really adore this game. It's so amazing. You and tons of expansion content too that is either released for it or is coming out as well. And then finally, my last game is Sprawlopolis, getting back to Button Shy. It is a truly portable game. Like I've mentioned before, I always have a copy in my purse, and it is very easy to teach and just pick up at a restaurant, bar, friend's house, etc. All the Button Shy games are very portable, but this one just seems to have a lot of depth, a lot of replayability. It's never quite the same game twice, and it just really hits that nice sweet spot. So those were my recommendations. Jamie, any last comments on this?
Well, I'm trying to think of anything else that we might suggest. Oh, I got a lovely little copy, and this is Kickstarted, so I don't know if it's available. I don't know if it's been published for mass market yet or not. But I picked up yet another copy of Love Letter, but this one is Princess themed, which is a cute little, LGBT kids book.
Oh, I want that so bad.
Art on it is gorgeous. It's so cute, and I love it so much. I will definitely be bringing it with me the next time I see you, so I can show it off.
Have you played it yet?
I haven't, but obviously, as I mentioned earlier, almost everybody's played Love Letter, but it's by far one of my favorites.
I'm just really interested to see what they've done with it, especially with the artwork. I'm assuming that's pretty much the same game, but really looking forward to that artwork. It looked very, very lovely. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is the very next episode, episode 30. We will have just gotten back from PAX Unplugged. And Jamie, I need to know what you're thinking. This, as we're recording this, we are like a week and a half away from, actually almost a week, from departing for PAX. It came up on us so quickly. But I need to know what you're looking forward to. You know, what are you excited about for PAX?
I'm actually a little bit nervous, not in a bad way, kind of in an anticipatory way, because for us, Origins was kind of a little bit more low stakes, whereas this one, I'm going in a little bit more of an official capacity in some sense, but, and also, of course, it has a lot to live up to, seeing as how fun Origins was. So the anticipatory nature of the whole thing is kind of getting me a little bit anxious and excited in a good way. And then, of course, I'm looking forward to having some cheesesteaks with you, so that'll be fun. But as far as
Yeah.
games go, I think my most anticipated one, like on a purely Jamie level, is the expansion to Set a Watch. It's been teased that they're going to be showing it off at PAX U, so I'm really hoping we get to take a look at that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Of course, you know me. I definitely gear towards a lot of lifestyle and mini focused games, so I will always be on the hunt for any con exclusive releases there. So you know me, we'll be dedicating a day at least to hunting that stuff down, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I've been thinking about maybe entering one of my minis in the PAX Unplugged painting competition. So we'll see if I'm feeling confident enough for that. But I am really excited to get my stuff out there.
I think you absolutely should. And I mean, somebody who's already been featured in a publisher's newsletter about a certain release, I think you should feel confident enough to maybe, throw something in.
At this point, I think the only thing that would stop me would be whether or not I have the time prior to it. But I definitely have stuff that's mostly painted that I could really just spruce up a little bit and turn in, I think. So we'll have to see. I've been talking myself up to it, and I think I'm at the point where I'm ready to commit to that idea.
Yeah, I look forward to you doing it. I think that would be really, really awesome to see that. And you mentioned cheesesteak. I think that is, other than the games, like my number one thing that I'm looking forward to the most. I was introduced a number of years ago to Jim's cheesesteak. I went down to Philly and asked a friend of mine, what exactly is the best cheesesteak place? Is it Pat's? Is it Geno's? And she said, nope, it's none of those. Those are for tourists and out-of-towners. If you really want a good experience, you go to Jim's. And it was a truly magical experience. The fact that you can get Cheese Whiz and provolone on your sandwich, that's a true American way to be able to get both. I think, Jamie, you would agree with me on that one.
My mom grew up in Philly, and she has a lot of opinions about cheesesteak. And I feel like if you ask anyone from Philly who's been to Philly or lived in Philly or any affiliation with Philly, any affiliation, if you will,
Good one.
Thanks. You get an answer. You get a different answer from everyone you ask. So I'm excited to try Jim's. Because the only one I know is Nemo's. That's more East Coast. So I'm excited to try this real deal Philly cheesesteak.
Supposedly, I don't know. I've only had a couple, but that one was really, really darn good. And then we also have our publisher media mixer on Thursday. I cannot wait to see some familiar faces and meet some new ones there as well. And I may be meeting up with a few people to do some content. Stay tuned for that. I can't announce anything specifically quite yet, but we have had some talks with some people. And really, really just looking forward to meeting, again, familiar faces, new people, and just getting to play some more games, because that's what this is all about.
I'm hoping that we get to meet up with some people that we met at Origins and kind of rekindle and maintain those relationships. So with enough luck, we'll be seeing people that we can now call friends and enjoying some games with them, whereas we didn't really have the time to do that at Origins.
I definitely agree with that. 100%. So stay tuned, because after the break, we have an interview with Mike Gnade from Rock Manor Games, and this is one that you will not want to miss. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Well, with me today is Michael Gnade. He is the owner of Rock Manor Games, and the designer of many games that you might be familiar with, including Lawyer Up and Set a Watch and Brass Empire, amongst many others. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being on, and I think we're just going to get into this right away. How did you get started in the gaming industry?
Good question. I sort of started in the gaming industry more on the video game side of things. I had a couple websites that covered indie games, so I would go to conventions like PAX East and PAX Prime and go to different booths in the Indie Mega Booth and film indie game developers and write stories about them, and was more of a content creator just because I was a huge fan of those types of games. That eventually led to a very tired feet at the end of a convention. And I wandered towards the back of the PAX East Expo Hall, and I was standing around with the guy who was working with me. He was like my cameraman. And we were sort of discussing the rest of our schedule and how tired our legs were from running around to all these different meetings and filming times. And we happened to be standing near a table that had a card game on it called Ascension. And the booth attendant there invited us to sit down and learn how to play. And we took them up on that and sat down and enjoyed ourselves and played Ascension and really enjoyed it. And that sort of rekindled my passion for, board and card games especially.
Yeah, Ascension is one of my early favorite deck builders, and that was in the days of PAX East when there was basically before PAX Unplugged even, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, well before. I would say that this was I probably played Ascension at PAX East in 2014 or 15. Maybe 2013, actually. When did Rise of Vigil come out?
Oh, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, that was the set that was there. I mean, it was quite a while ago.
So, Rock Manor Games, what exactly is the origins of that? Why did you start it? What led to its origination?
Sure. So once I played Ascension, I became obsessed with all the the deck building mechanic especially, and I started buying up and playing all the different deck builders that were available at the time. DC Deck Builder, obviously Dominion, Star Realms was one that I liked a lot because it had some more interaction between players, but it had the player elimination problem. So I couldn't quite find a deck builder that did all the things I wanted it to do. So that led me to sort of design and make my own game. And at the time, it was just going to be something for myself and for my friends. And, long story short, as part of that process, I sort of decided to apply to the Indie Mega Booth. And Brass Empire got into PAX Prime in their tabletop showcase back in the day, whenever that was, which, got me interacting with players outside of sort of my immediate circle. And I saw how much people were enjoying the game. And I decided to throw it up on Kickstarter. And it was successful, and it made some money and allowed me to get it, out there and delivered to backers and sort of prove myself as being able to go through that process. After that, several years passed, and I sort of kept working on some ideas and other games I had. And it really wasn't until Maximum Apocalypse came out that I really thought this was something I could do, not as just a side hustle, and as something where I could actually be successful in it, being sort of a small publisher. So that's the origin story of Rock Manor Games.
Well, and you've already touched on what my next question was going to be, your initial design experience with your first game, Brass Empire. So I'm going to ask something a little bit adjacent to that. And what did you learn during the design of Brass Empire and kind of kickstarting it, the whole process? Any big lessons learned or anything that found its way into future games?
I would say most of the big lessons learned on Brass Empire, I was lucky in in a lot of ways, because I had been involved in the indie gaming scene on the video game side of things. I was familiar with other people, in my area, in the Philadelphia region, and especially on the East Coast up in Boston. And those people pretty quickly got me hooked up with groups in our area that do playtesting, and the Game Makers Guild of Philadelphia and Tabletop Co-op, and these groups of other tabletop designers and gamers who I could bounce ideas off of and playtest or go to conventions in a more affordable way. There were years there where I would go to PAX Prime and I was in the tabletop co-op room, which was like basically a conference room off of the escalators. It wasn't even on the expo hall. But that convention was so big at the time that people sort of straggled their way in, and we had this big, huge convention. It was a big, huge conference table with like 6 tables all connected in a big O, and we all would just be in different parts of those tables. Little groups of us. It'd be like 6 or 8 of us indie designers would sort of all chip in and pay for the room together. So I was able to sort of get out there publicly in that way and have some good resources and connections to playtest. So I felt the first half of it, I was lucky enough to sort of have put this other time out there being involved in the industry to sort of take some shortcuts with playtesting, getting the game out there, sort of getting the game ready for Kickstarter, even building a little bit of a mailing list by being on the Indie Mega Booth tabletop showcase. And the Indie Mega Booth was a great thing that took all the indie game designers, video game wise, and put them in the expo hall before it shut down. So I was lucky enough to be on the show floor at PAX Prime one year leading up to Brass Empire on Kickstarter. So that helped me with that part. And I felt a lot of the lessons I learned happened more after the Kickstarter. So finding quotes and wiring money to China and then hoping that things were done. I'm really happy I started with a card game. A lot of people online will tell you if you want to get into tabletop and board game publishing and Kickstarter, it's really important that you start with a card game first. And I wouldn't say Brass Empire was a simple card game, but at least was mostly cards as far as components went. And that made the quoting process a lot easier. But I would still say that I overpaid on my first print run for Brass Empire because of my inexperience. But at the time, it was literally a side project. I had a full-time job doing computer consulting and hosting stuff. So it was really just something before I had kids that was a fun thing to do. And it became much more serious after that. and the pressure has increased drastically afterwards.
Yeah, you are definitely now an established name in the community. And I kind of want to fast forward a little bit to one of your more recent games, Lawyer Up, that my listeners are going to be familiar with. So what was the inspiration behind Lawyer Up?
So I co-designed Lawyer Up with Sam Bailey, and the sort of idea for the game, at least the theme of the game, sort of came from me. And I went to college, obviously, and I've stayed in touch with a lot of my college and high school friends. And a large proportion of them have become lawyers. And talking to them all the time and sort of hearing about all their lawyer stuff, and I'm switching firms and sometimes they'll get into the cases, but usually it's more about I switch the firm and I've got to build up a client base and all this kind of stuff. And just knowing that I had so many friends involved in different aspects of the legal field, sort of, it made me look around and say, hey, we've got a million legal shows, Law and Order shows and CSI shows and all these other sort of courtroom drama things on television and movies. And when I looked at the tabletop gaming space, I didn't see, at least I didn't find or see any notable courtroom or legal games other than sort of on the video game side of thing, you've got the Japanese Capcom game like Ace Attorney. Mm-hmm. Which has its own idiosyncrasies because it's not really based on, the United States legal system. So I had this idea of coming up with an asymmetrical card game based on being a lawyer, where the prosecution and defense would play differently. I'm a huge fan of Netrunner, so I love the asymmetry of that game and how the corporation and runners play differently. And at the time I came up with the game, which was 6-7 years ago at this point, there weren't a lot of other asymmetrical games out there. I was at a lunch with Sam Bailey, and we were play testing one of his games, which was about the Fae and going to sleep and slumbering. And he basically said, what's next for you after, I was a nobody at that point. I think I had only done Brass Empire. Maybe I had kickstarted Maximum Apocalypse, maybe. But it was one of my first Gen Cons. And Sam Bailey and I just had lunch, and he was sort of asking the other game ideas I had. And I mentioned, I think it'd be really cool to have a lawyer game. I haven't seen any of those out there. And he was interested, and we stayed in touch. And just started working on the game together. And it was one of those things, like, it was always on the back burner, but every time we came together and we're going to a convention together, we would iterate on whatever we were working on and come with a new prototype that we could play before the convention and expo hall sort of opened up.
The other thing that I have seen with Lawyer Up is the story that gets told during the game. And I need to know what the process was for writing those cases. You have a kind of art racketeering case, and then you have a murder case that's in there. And then we will talk about the expansions in a minute. What was your process behind going through and writing those cases up?
Well, I've got to give credit to Sam, because I feel like, at least as far as the flavor text and storytelling goes, that was definitely something that Sam added in to the murder case, at some point when we were working on it. But as far as how the game came about being developed, we started with the murder case. So in the core box, there's the art forgery case, which is more of an intro case, and the more complex case. Honestly, one of the more complex cases of all that's available right now is the murder case, and that's where we started, because it's one of the more asymmetrical cases where the prosecution has to win every juror, because of reasonable doubt, to believe that Jessica has committed the murder in that case. There was a lot of work that went into balancing the game so that the prosecution could win that way, and lock every juror, or at least win every juror to convict her. So we actually started with a more difficult case, with a case that had more asymmetry, and that was the case that we really iterated on the most. The murder case is the first prototype we played, and it was the prototype we kept iterating on again and again until barely any of the core rules that you've seen in the final game, they basically were all set. They weren't changing anymore. And once we got to that point, then we started brainstorming and coming up with other case ideas. We sort of knew, we had a lot of case ideas sort of from a brainstorm session that we had thrown out. But once we had the core gameplay loop structured, then we sort of went back to that list of things and said, here are the ones that we should return to and really make an expansion case or make a case out of. Sam came up with the art forgery case, but that was actually one of the easiest cases to do, because that case is all about learning the base decks and the basic mechanisms of the game. That's why it's sort of built to be the tutorial case. And we made it much more asymmetrical. So the witnesses have the same sort of number values for prosecution and defense. When you count up the witnesses in the deck, they're equal on both sides. And the base decks that you shuffle into your drafted evidence that you draft are the same. And we made the paintings, we made it an art forgery case and made the painting such an important piece of evidence, because when we demoed and taught the game to new players, we could tell people when they're doing the drafting section that they want to focus on. It was easier for us to teach them that drafting, and we cut the drafting time down. Because when we were playtesting, when we threw people right into the murder case, people would play it and they would like it, but they would say when they finished, oh, now that I've played it, I would have drafted completely differently. The art forgery case lets you cut through some of the strategies of the discovery a little bit better. And you can tell people, listen, you want to draft cards of your color with high numbers, and you want to draft paintings. They're the most important thing in an art forgery case. And people sort of get that thematically, and it helps them with that discovery process. Because one of the hardest things about teaching Lawyer Up is people have to draft cards before they really know how to play or have seen the game played yet. So that's always been one of the hard parts of demoing it and teaching it. And then the other case ideas just came from that original brainstorm. So, we knew we each wanted to do one. So I took on the Godfather case, because I'm a big fan of the Godfather movies and mafia movies and the television show The Sopranos. So I felt like I had some good, cliches and tropes that I knew about, and I could incorporate into my Godfather case. And then Sam took the lead on the witch trial, and we got together and discussed sort of the main mechanic of each of those cases. But then each of us sort of designed the initial prototype to play, and the other designer took on the role as more of the developer. So I sort of made up all the cards and made the initial prototype for Godfather, and then Sam helped me develop and go through all the cards and balance it and sort of guide my hand as we went. And I sort of did the same thing for him for Witch Trial.
And I think the two expansions are very, very interesting because they almost introduce a new feel or mechanic, in both of them. And I kind of wanted to go into the future of Lawyer Up because in my review, I kind of almost compared it to a Chronicles of Crime or a Time Stories where you can go to multiple different time periods. You can have some unique mechanics for each of them. What do you envision as the future for this game?
Well, I would say the future's become much more solidified recently because Sam and I have really honed in on the next cases we're going to do. And I mean, we've been working on a bunch since Lawyer Up was kickstarted, but the best of the ideas have sort of risen to the top and are actively being developed currently. But one of the important things, I'm glad you mentioned that the mechanics are so different, because one of the important things and one of the great things about Lawyer Up, I think, is that when you buy an expansion or play a different case, the game, while you know the core mechanics, you don't need to like relearn the game. The game feels drastically different with how we're changing win conditions and closing statements and setups and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for the witch trial, for example, there's no jury. The jury you're used to using is gone, and instead you're putting biases on the witnesses you're calling, and you're accusing them of being witches, and that's what the witch trial is about. So we've continued that trend. We are working on what we're calling sort of season 2 now. I would say that we've locked in the 3 cases we're going to do, and those 3 cases are going to be film noir sort of inspired private eye case, where you take on the role of a private investigator. It's 1950s-ish Hollywood, and an actress has been murdered, and you're a private investigator that's been sort of framed for her murder. So as the defense, you are defending yourself as the private investigator in courtroom, and you're splitting your time between making arguments in court or spending those same cards you would use to make your arguments in court to investigate clues outside of the courtroom to uncover, sort of Clue style, like the old board game Clue, who did it, with what weapon, and where, and why. So one of the ways you can win as the defense is if you can actually, even if you're losing in court in closing statements and all the jurors against you, if you can correctly name the who, what, where, when of the case and are correct in the clues, you can win in the final minutes. But that's difficult to do. There's because the prosecution has a bunch of conspirators who are the witnesses of the case, and they can place red herrings on all your clues, making them more difficult to solve. Those are sort of the 2 dynamics at play. So you can play that case sort of more straight up as the private investigator and just try to win in court, but the odds are stacked a little bit more against you than normal. So you want to make sure you're pressuring the prosecution in your hunting down of clues so that they waste some of their resources putting up sort of barriers in your way while you try to solve this sort of web of intrigue in early Hollywood. So that's one of them that we've been working on. The other case we have is going to be a divorce case. And in the divorce case, it's a little more asymmetrical in a way because prosecution and defense are just, they're each side of the marriage. They're one of the 2 partners. And those partners have sort of ambiguous names and are double-sided. So you can make each of the partners in the relationship, you can make male or female. So you can have a same-sex marriage or a heterosexual marriage, or however you want to flip the cards, whatever players want to play that as. And then what you're fighting over in that case is, instead of having a jury, we have assets from the marriage. So we have things like the house and the kids and money and stocks and the business. We know that divorce may hit home or close to home for some people. So we've tried to make it a little more outlandish. It's a lifestyles of the rich and famous divorce. One of the characters is a tech CEO who started a huge fictional social media company and has become quite wealthy in the process. And the other one is a high-profile TV film celebrity. Hopefully that makes it a little bit more palatable for people that have actually gone through a divorce. But the core thing is you're fighting over these assets. You pick a strategy just like you do in some of the base cases of the original game. But your strategy actually sets you up for what your emotional state is at the course of this divorce. So you can play it cooperatively potentially. If we both pick sort of one of the strategies that's sort of going for an amicable divorce, And if we work together to make sure the assets are evenly split, we can both win. But if I pick to end things amicably and you're spiteful and you pick that sort of strategy, then we're not going to be able to both win. Either you're going to win by a lot and I'm going to be really upset and torn, or you're going to lose because I'm trying to keep things close and fair, and because you're spiteful, you want to make sure you take more than I do. So we have these different situations that people can play, and your emotional state can change throughout the course of the game. So you may start off as spiteful, but there are cards that can be played that can change you to be then maybe you go from being spiteful to be in denial about your marriage ending, or you become prideful, or you become compromising. We have these secret attitudes in the divorce case cards that each player has. And you're fighting over these assets in the middle. And each asset has a victory point condition, and you can share them. So if you win them, you get all the points. If you share them, you split the points in half. And you can also end with a dual win. If we both have 10 points worth of assets, well, then it was an amicable divorce and we both win, even if we didn't choose that strategy that we were going for. So it's one of these interesting, like, you can win, you can lose, you can tie, you can both win, you can both lose situations, because we wanted to try to mimic what can happen in real life. Sometimes divorces are nice and easy, and sometimes they can be really scandalous. And because this is sort of a celebrity case, we have a card type and a piece of evidence that's called scandalous evidence. And it's everything that's in the tabloids that you're bringing into the courtroom. It's all the infidelity and rumors and gossip about why the marriage is potentially ending. If you decide to go down that road and sort of drag each other through the mud, that's when the stakes get a little higher and a little bit more competitive.
That is amazing. And that goes to further suit my point that this really is a system. And what you have developed at the core is a system that really can be adapted in a multitude of different ways. And I'm looking forward to this next wave for sure.
And then last but not least, in the next wave for season 2 is we have a casino heist, which is like set in the 1980s. So we're going to have sort of a 1980s look to it with some, bright colors and things. And in that case, a crew of criminals is being put on trial, and you're swaying influence on them up and down. Each of these criminals and these people on trial is sort of part of a crew, like an Ocean's 11 crew, and they have different secrets and tips, and you have to sort of figure out which of these crew members actually did the crime and is trying to con you, and which one is sort of an informant and trying to rat out the other guys. So you're trying to, as the prosecution, you're trying to convict as many of the criminals as you can. And as the defense, you're trying to defend as many as you can, sort of as a group. So each criminal has their own sort of meter that you're swaying up or down. And the secret cards that are being placed on them are activated at the end of the game during closing statements, and they can adjust where you think that they are. So you may think you're at the top of one of them and you've convicted, the ringleader of the heist, and then they reveal a bunch of secrets and they were conning you the whole time, and your influence on them drops 2 or 3 points, making the other player win, get that person off or whatever. So it's all about knowing what those secrets are and manipulating those secrets and changing them so you don't get conned or tricked in the end.
That is so amazing, Mike. I am looking forward to all of these immensely. That's fantastic. So let's jump to Set a Watch, which was definitely one of your more popular titles. And recently, you started fulfilling the Kickstarter for Swords of the Coin.
Yep.
Jamie is very much looking forward to that, by the way. She is a huge fan of Set a Watch. So what were some of your experiences with the pandemic and kickstarting during the pandemic with Swords of the Coin, and kind of going through everything that's gone on over the past year or so?
Some of it was not so bad. So the kickstarting of Set a Watch went pretty well. And we didn't kickstart it right when the pandemic started. We kickstarted in October of last year, so about a year ago. So it's sort of when we had that second slump or whatever. We didn't have the vaccines yet, but people were getting out somewhat over the summer. And it was before all the numbers started getting really bad over Thanksgiving and Christmas. So people were sort of used to the pandemic to an extent. when we kickstarted it, so that was relatively normal. The kickstarting process was that part of the process, when the Kickstarter was actually running and people could pledge for it, was exciting and felt relatively normal. I don't remember anything sticking out, but everything after that, because of the pandemic, was pretty horrible. I believe Set a Watch is the first Kickstarter that we've fulfilled late. We're a month late, I think, because I think it was October was our sort of deadline. And typically we beat those dates. So, I mean, under normal times, Set a Watch probably would have come out over the summer right before Gen Con, like in July, end of July, August. The US and North America is sort of just finishing up now. The US shipments are all out of the warehouse. Canadian should be starting next week. Australia should be starting the week after that. And then Europe and the UK is still sort of a question mark. And my experience with Lawyer Up during the pandemic, fulfilling it, was pretty awful when it came to getting through customs in Germany with the shutdowns, and you get stuck in customs for weeks and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really nervous about how different in timing wise, like how much longer is Europe and the rest of the world sort of going to take behind Australia and these other regions. But it was horrible. I mean, container prices were astronomical. Booking a container, I think, took us 3 months, to actually book a container to get it on a ship to get over. Our game was finished manufacturing in June, and I still don't have the confirmation and the bill of lading for the UK and EU shipments. I know they've been picked up and they're on a ship, but I don't actually have the documentation because the delays from the shipping company and paperwork are just as bad as the delays getting in and out of port. Obviously, they're more worried about moving ships to and from, and the paperwork that comes with that is sort of a second thought when everyone's stressed out and working. So I just got the paperwork for the US thing, which docked and got through like a week ago. It's a lot of faith and it's a lot of waiting and having emails go unanswered and hoping that no news is good news sort of thing. But, the expense of it and all that has been pretty terrible. I'm very happy that it'll be over, and I'm very happy that I think by the time I fulfill another Kickstarter, things should have hopefully settled down. And it's not something I'll have to deal with again as far as, these freight prices that were 5 times what they normally were. They've come down. They're actually getting pretty reasonable again, but they're not even close to what they were, pre-pandemic, but they're not skyrocketing like they were, which is really alarming.
Well, and I was just having a conversation with one of my friends today and trying to explain what was going on during the pandemic with the shipping situation. And I said, certain publishers dealt different ways with the increase. You have a budget and you think, okay, I'm going to budget a little bit higher than what I think it's going to be, but it's certainly not 500% of what you actually think it's going to be. A little bit more maybe, but not what we saw that was just so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing is that the reality is that some publishers aren't going to make it. And I know some already, and some smaller ones and some larger ones, that the pandemic, while maybe it didn't put them out of business at the beginning, because what was sort of ironic is that 2019, 2020 was a pretty good year for us with the games we had available. We were really selling things that we had in stock when the pandemic was going on. Were selling quite well because I think people were stuck at home and they could play games like Lawyer Up, and they were ordering them online. And it was something that they could do while they were stuck in their house. The problem is when you ran out of stuff to sell, the timing and time frame of getting those things not only is longer, but it's a lot more expensive. And I think for bigger publishers that need a constant revenue stream, we're lucky enough to be smaller and be a little bit more lean and mean, and hopefully we'll weather the expenses we've sort of suffered through this Swords of the Coin thing. But, there are some publishers that aren't going to be able to and haven't been able to. And they won't be able to make games anymore. They'll have to get broken up or purchased by other publishers, I guess, their catalog maybe.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And, especially who knows what they would have gone on to do if it hadn't been for this. But, that's kind of the way that the business is, unfortunately. I want to move on to your design process and a real quick kind of question. You have a lot of different themes and different mechanisms in your portfolio. And I have to ask, do you usually design with a theme in mind first or your mechanisms in mind first?
I would say personally, I start with theme because I really like the mechanisms and themes to work together. So, in the board game landscape of all the games that are out there, the genre that I am sick of, that I have like no interest in, of all the games that are being played out, are like the very, Euro games that just have a theme on top of them that's just informing you of the resources you're collecting to build the engine that you're building, that are very like dry or almost inconsequential. Those are the type of games I'm just like, I'm not saying they're terrible. There's a game for everyone out there, and games aren't for everybody. But there are so many Euro games that are just like, oh, this is a Euro game where you collect things about and do fishing. This is a game that you collect things and do, spend those resources on building a city. And these are the theme where you collect things and you're building a temple in Egypt. Like there's so many of those, and the theme is it's just like different art for the same mechanisms and things that I've played in a million other games. Those are the games that I steer away from. So I think because that's my sort of personal taste, I tend to lean into heavier themes, thematic, themes that my big goal in any one of my games is that you leave the table and you've sort of created an emergent story or an emergent experience that you'll remember. So I don't want you to walk away feeling like you've just played another Splendor with a theme slapped on top of it, where you've just collected things to collect cards of another thing or something. Whether it's Set a Watch and you feel the tenseness of clearing that line, or whether it's Lawyer Up, reading the flavor text on the cards to role play the story that you're telling by playing the game itself, I would say theme comes first, and I try to marry the theme and the mechanisms of what you're doing to sort of make sense and work together. It also informs the design process. I mean, in Maximum Apocalypse, there were so many times where rules of the game were just like the things that you would need to do in the real world, when you put a card that's a weapon in Maximum Apocalypse in play, it comes in with so many shots. And when you run out of shots, you need to play ammunition to reload it, because that's what real life's like. I wasn't even thinking about mechanisms as much at that point. I was literally just thinking about what would happen in an action video game when your clip's empty. You got to sit there and take a second and hit the X button to reload it, or in real life, or any of these movies out there that's based on an apocalyptic theme. So many of those things came through what would make sense thematically in like the real world, or if it was an actual apocalypse. And similarly to Set a Watch, that's why the brighter the fire burns, the more cards you could save. So we really try to marry theme and mechanics as best we can at Rock Manor Games. That's what I would say I do personally, and those are the games I tend to publish.
No, and that certainly makes sense, especially seeing your kind of portfolio. It definitely does make a lot of sense that theme would come first for you. Anything that people should know about that is upcoming either from you or from Rock Manor in general?
Well, yeah, we talked about Lawyer Up Season 2. That'll definitely happen sometime next year. But before that happens, we actually have a game called Seas of Havoc, which I recently learned has been in development since 2013. It's not designed by me. It's designed by Sebastian Bernier-Wong and Peter Gorniak. I've recently learned, because we've been working on some of the lead up to the Kickstarter and doing some, like informative posts and updates about how the game got started and all this kind of stuff. I recently learned that Sebastian was a student of Peter's, and he was taking a game design class at college. And this game came out of an assignment in 2003 when he was in school, where he had to make a game that featured worker placement and deck building. And he came up with a game called Sloops, which is the game that I signed, and then we've renamed Seas of Havoc. So Seas of Havoc will be coming to Kickstarter early in January, and it's a naval combat game where the cards you play actually move your ship and show you the maneuvers you can do on your ship. And you maneuver your pirate ship or privateer ship around a grid and try to set up shots, because it takes place during the Age of Sail, so the cannons shoot out the sides of your ship, either left or right. So you need to turn your ship accordingly and shoot your cannons out of the side to hit the other players, scoring you infamy when you damage other players. That's heading to Kickstarter, hopefully early sometime next year, probably in January, shortly after the holiday season's over. We're scrambling to get prototype preview copies for PAX Unplugged. So I'm really hoping, and it's looking like it'll come through, that we'll have copies of the game to play at PAX Unplugged. So if you're interested in, if anyone listening happens to be going to PAX Unplugged, hopefully we'll have that in our booth and you can come by and check it out and play it for yourself.
Well, somebody that you're talking to right now is very interested in
Yeah.
playing that at PAX Unplugged, so I will definitely be there. And anybody else that's listening, just coordinate with us and maybe you can get in on a game with us.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a great game. They were working on it. It was this school project that became a game outside of school. They actually ended up winning 2 design awards in 2016. And then nothing happened with the game until during the pandemic, they decided to go to a pitch meeting that we were doing digitally for Unpub. And I happened to come across the game and like it so much. And I couldn't believe, after winning the Canadian Design Award in the Cardboard Edison, being a Cardboard Edison finalist, that they hadn't signed the game, back then. So, or maybe they did and it fell through. I don't know. I never pressed them on it. But, luckily, it's a game that's going to be made now.
Exactly. And you got your hands on it. So
Yeah.
The last question that I had for you is something that I ask everybody, and that is, what's on your table other than the games that you have designed or published?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned that I'm a huge Netrunner fan. I haven't played it recently, but I do bleed Netrunner. I love it. I never played it as much. I never can play that game enough. One of my favorite games this year that came out this year so far is Ankh by Eric Lang. It's sort of the third game in his Dudes on a Map trilogy, started with Blood Rage. Mm-hmm. So Ankh is a huge favorite. I actually am playing it on Friday. I've got some friends who haven't played it yet, and they're excited to it, and we've already scheduled our time, and they're coming over Friday. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll be playing it again this weekend. I recently played Clank in Space. I always liked it, obviously a deck builder, but I feel like I haven't played it in a couple years, and for some reason my wife and I played it this weekend, and I was like, man, I'm so glad I still have this game. This is a great game, and I enjoyed it. I liked it more than I remembered, It was a nice surprise. And I was like, this is why I kept this game. It's really fun. Other games I've played a lot. I played Lost Ruins of Arnak a few times at Origins. My hot take on it is that there's nothing perpetually wrong with it, but it's a deck builder worker placement game, and I don't feel like I get enough of either, and I don't quite get the hype of it. I know it's a game that's been very successful. Mm-hmm. I think it's good. I just don't think it's as great as people. I'm not buying into the greatness of it, though I do like the theme a lot. But I would say a bigger hit from Origins that I just grabbed for $30 is Brew. It's this little dice manipulation, area control placement game that plays in 30 minutes. And it's quite deep, but also easy enough that my daughter sort of can play it. My 6-year-old daughter has played it and likes the art and stuff with it. So that's a really cool game, especially when you think about the value of it. I mean, it's $30. You get some cool custom dice, and it's a tight little game for $30 and something that I played. I think I've played that game 5 times since Origins, which is a lot for me. And part of it's because the setup and teardown is so quick, and you can play the game so quick. Other games I've been playing, I played Burgle Brothers 2 recently because I mentioned that casino heist we were working on, and I was trying to play other games that have sort of a heisty theme to sort of see what's in there, to see if we got any ideas for a card or two or something thematic we could throw in there as a piece of evidence. I think that's basically all I've been playing.
Yeah, Brew is one that Jamie has been bringing over constantly, and we just never quite get to it, but she is a huge fan of Brew.
Yeah, I mean, you can start with it. It's 30 minutes. It's literally 30 minutes. I also recently played Dinosaur World Roar and Write, and I got the Dinosaur World, the bigger game, but I haven't gotten the big one to the table yet. I just have played the roll and write version of it, which I liked more than Dinosaur Island. So it was a pleasant surprise.
I need to check that one out because I'm kind of mixed on Dinosaur Island, to tell you the truth. It's an interesting game, but I feel like there's almost a little bit too much going on for what it is.
Completely agree. When I played Dinosaur Island, I felt like I was playing a game with 2 expansions attached to it the first time I played it. And I felt like there was one too many phases. and I ended up getting rid of it. But I really I really want a good dinosaur game, and my favorite thing about Dinosaur Island was the DNA dice and the dice drafting, and the roll and write. That's like the main thing that the roll and write focuses on. So you should definitely check it out if you were mixed on Dinosaur Island, because I like the roll and write a lot more. I like the roll and write a lot more than the base Dinosaur Island. And I haven't played the bigger world version, but from what I've heard, it gives you more of an opportunity to build your dinosaur park out, which is what the sort of the thing I always felt I didn't have in the Dinosaur Island phase, the Dinosaur Island one.
I absolutely agree with that. And that's kind of one of those things that you want to build up those dinosaurs, like you said. That was interesting. And then you really want to build that park out, because you always thought about how cool it would be to build out your park in like a Jurassic Park the game. And I felt like that's what it always tried to be, and it was just kind of lacking.
Yeah. I don't know about World yet, but hopefully it delivers. But I mean, I got the bigger game. I really just wanted the roll and write, because that sounded right up my alley when it was on Kickstarter. And it was like the deal with them both together was such a good deal on Kickstarter. I was like, well, even though I don't really want the bigger game, I'll get it just because I don't want to pay like $50 for a roll and write on Kickstarter or whatever it was. Maybe it was like $40. It was like, I wouldn't normally Kickstarter something like this, but if I can bundle them together and like pay for shipping together, it'll make more sense. So I'll do it.
No, absolutely. That definitely does. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. And if anybody wants to see what Rock Manor offers and what you have coming up, where can they get a hold of you?
Well, the best place for some of that stuff is obviously our website, rockmanorgames.com. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram and a Twitter account as well. We're on YouTube too. But I tell people that I think the best way to stay in touch with things, I mean, it depends on where you like to get your information, but I like email, and we have a newsletter that we use. I call it a quarterly newsletter, but I was just looking at, we've sent, in the past 12 months, we've only sent 2 newsletters. So we don't send them out a lot often, but when we do send them, they have a bunch of information on them. We're sending one out. It's the second one that we sent out this year, and it's got like the set of Watch Swords of the Coin stuff is in stock and all the information about Seas of Havoc. We also do this little graphic where we're showing all the games in our pipeline, and we have like a little progress report on them, and we write a little sentence about them. So you can see little previews of things that we have even further down the line that I even talk about in this episode too. So I always tell people that the newsletter is a great way to stay in touch with us. But you can also follow us on Instagram. I do my best to post to Instagram the games I've been playing lately that are on my table and what I think of them. And we'll also post pictures of like games arriving and production copies popping in and things like that. And then I'll also be on our Facebook page and stuff as well.
Well, again, Mike, thank you so much for being on today's episode. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and have a great rest of your week.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us today. Next time, we may actually be getting into the territory where we have to discuss the best games that we've seen in 2021 already. I can't believe it. The year has gone so incredibly fast, and I am nowhere near my goal on my Shelf of Shame. But we will be talking about that in the next couple of episodes. So, if you want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can visit our website, and all our social media links are on there, including our Instagram and Twitter at cardboard_time. Any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, please email cardboardtime@gmail.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in another 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time. Happy gaming.